The GovX Show is supported by Forrester, helping government organisations perform at their best. Visit forrester.com to learn more.
Hello again, and welcome to the GovX Show. I'm Tim Coulthard, Community Director here at GovX Digital and your regular host of the show. Delighted to say that joining me today is Lyndon Fraser from the team at Google Chrome Enterprise, and he's going to be helping us explore the future of the digital workplace. Hybrid models, remote working, new forms of hardware, new forms of software have all come into play in the past 18 months. And now public sector organisations are looking to embed that change into something permanent and something that will work for both teams, but also continue to deliver high quality outcomes in terms of service delivery on the front line. So we're going to explore what that means. What's the hardware, software? What's the inclusion aspects, accessibility, security, all these things that digital teams are wrestling with as they look to make this permanent solution. So we're going to jump into that conversation very shortly. And just to flag that Lyndon's also going to join us at the Local Government Transformation Show next month to discuss this in more detail with a panel of experts from local government who are leading the way in this digital transformation. So lots to get into. Let's jump into that conversation now. So Lyndon, welcome to the GovX Show. Really great to have you joining us today.
Thanks for hosting me today, Tim. Look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into this because, as we know, a lot's changed in the world in the past 18 months or so. And one of those main areas is how and where we work. And there's some really interesting topics to delve into there. So looking forward to jumping into that. Before we do get into some of that, though, it'd be really interesting to hear about your background. You're obviously with Google Chrome Enterprise, but I know you've had a sort of interesting journey along the way. So let's set the scene by hearing a bit about your background and how it's led you to this point today.
Yeah, sure thing. So I grew up in Vancouver in Canada and came over to the UK in 1996. Both my parents are English. I always mention this because I find people can be distracted otherwise trying to place where my slightly bizarre accent is from. Bit of a mix. Live with my wife and 3 boys, all under 8. So this new world of working from home and homeschooling and Hot Wheels cars being regularly smashed against my office door. I've been there, right? As we all have, as you say, over the last 18 months. Work-wise, I actually began working in London back in 1999 for a business that was selling information to companies on CD-ROMs, which I guess some listeners will remember what a CD-ROM was all about. This then actually moved from CD-ROM to SaaS-based applications, and we were one of the first to actually integrate with Salesforce.com back when Salesforce wasn't as regularly known. So had a bit of a front row seat to witness firsthand the disruptive nature of cloud computing and how they went on to revolutionize the CRM world, right?
Yeah.
9 years ago, I moved across to Google. That was in the early days, really, of Google Cloud, helping businesses to understand how they could embrace collaborative ways of working, right? Using cloud-based tools like Gmail and Docs and Drive. They're all known as Google Workspace today. But over the past 3 years, I've been focused actually entirely on the growth of enterprise managed Chromebooks within the workplace. And this year, I've actually taken over responsibility for the UK public sector, which I'm really excited about. I find in the commercial space where I've spent a lot of my time, companies can often be quite guarded and protective when they found good technology. They're typically less willing to share with others, right? Given the more competitive world they operate in. But I've already experienced quite the opposite in public sector, with a real willingness to share ideas with one another and help each other improve how they work today, right? And I think this willingness to help one another has been particularly true over the last year, right? Where we've seen the way that we all work has completely changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Something really pleasing about your journey from the world of CD-ROMs. I remember, in the 90s, the equivalent of the internet was like a CD-ROM full of an encyclopedia. I guess that was all you had. So for you to have kind of made that journey all the way through now, I think that's great. It's a great transition. And you mentioned the public sector and that spirit of sort of collaboration, and that's something we hear again and again. And I think bringing to the fore those ways of improving and optimizing where we are now in terms of how we work, where we work, what systems, what processes, what culture sits behind that. It's going to be key, because let's face it, there aren't going to be pots of money swimming around as we have to pay our way out of what we've been through. So really interested in sort of exploring how these new ways of working can kind of facilitate best practice, can facilitate better use of budgets and that sort of thing. So yeah, we'll jump into some of that as we go along, I'm sure. So let's take stock a little bit, because I think we all say it's been an incredible time, but that means different things to different people and to different organizations. But for you, in terms of the conversations you're having and sort of, your engagement with public sector organizations and so on, we say the world has changed. We say we work very differently now. But what are those big shifts that you've seen, and particularly how those challenges might have impacted the public sector as they look to kind of, keep plugging on even in the most sort of difficult circumstances?
Yeah, there was an interesting stat actually from McKinsey, which stated that organizations actually digitized 40 times faster than executives believed was possible before the pandemic. And if we think about the public sector, departments and bodies had to really quickly roll out a strategy to mobilize their workforce almost overnight. Really, it was quite a crazy time. I mean, many of our conversations moved from organizations discussing our technology as part of a 2-year transition plan, which very quickly turned into, we need these cloud-based devices by next Thursday, right? So it was pretty rapid movement. Thankfully, we're the type of team, which means we were able to help several organizations to make a transition to working from home, and now helping them into the world of kind of hybrid work. But it was definitely a huge transition for the UK civil service, right, where long-standing efforts to expand flexible working practices had in the main made relatively slow progress up until recent days. But it's been amazing to see the transition of so many, right, quickly finding ways to work together remotely, not only to maintain essential operations, but to collectively tackle the national emergency, right? Helping protect you and I and the public through the pandemic. I think where we are now, we're beginning to come out the other side and beginning to learn and better understand the lessons and how everybody fared, right? And I think technology and IT teams within the public sector, we've seen large differences between how they have fared. And I think it's become clear for many that IT admins in particular need different solutions to help them meet the evolving demands and new ways of working that have been forced upon us, really. And it's this kind of sudden disruption to the status quo and how we've always done things that is challenging. But we're finding many are looking to use this opportunity to just think completely differently about things. A good example, I guess, of this, and one that I'm personally involved with is really around legacy endpoints, right? If you think about laptops and computers that we've been used to using, they've not been designed or built to support these new flexible ways of working, right? When a high degree of intervention is needed by IT teams to ensure that virus updates and software updates and OS patches and data has all been backed up, that's really, really tricky to do when so many of your workforce are remote, right? And it was a sudden, remote, right? So that kind of way of doing things, it's now seen as quite inefficient, and more importantly, it can present security vulnerabilities as well.
Yeah. So I'm interested in I guess that bridge between the culture and the where we are, and then getting into the sort of technological side of it as well, and how that's built. And I suppose, like you say, for IT teams, their worlds are radically different and probably will never be the same again. I mean, the idea that somebody from IT comes and stands next to you and leans over your keyboard and does X, Y, and Z because you say it's not running properly. I mean, it was so prevalent, and yet now it's almost gone overnight. Like you say, it's the transformation is just profound and probably permanent to some degree, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and you have a different expectation, right? If you think about employees now especially now expect to be able to seamlessly work from anywhere, right, on any device. I think this expectation, particularly for new employees entering the workforce, has always been there. This kind of more modern way of working. But IT teams now will need to ensure that they're set up to cater for a new hybrid approach to work, right? And part of that is also in order to retain talent, right? You want to retain your existing talent that expects to be able to work this way, but also attract new talent, right?
Yeah.
I know when I first joined Google, the bulk of pretty much every discussion we were having at that time was around combating the FUD, right? The kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that was being spread at that time around cloud computing. Was it secure enough? Could a real business rely on it? Was it just a passing fad, right? And these days, every public sector organization that we speak to has a cloud strategy, right? They're either busily implementing it now, or at least working towards it. And I think what we've seen is those that were further ahead in this journey certainly had less to worry about over the last year or so. Many who had invested in SaaS-based products or virtual desktops, cloud-based devices, they saw that home-based workforce swell from 3 to 5% to nearly 100%. And for many of them, they didn't even break a sweat when it came to the technology itself. The technology just worked, which meant they could focus on all of the massive tasks, right, that they were faced with without any distraction from their technical setup, right, which has been really, really important.
And they didn't have time to waste. I mean, it was like every day counted. When you look at things like HMRC building the furlough scheme in a matter of weeks and rolling it out, if you're stood scratching your head trying to work out the IT infrastructure that sits behind that, then you've got big problems. And so the idea that you can just hit go and the brain power is all focused on solving the problem, not setting up the implements and the tools and the processes and the software to even work on that challenge. That's a huge kind of starting point to get going with. And I think what we've also been seeing is that the organizations that are, heavily into cloud already, not just in terms of the way they work, but then in terms of the way they can collaborate in the future, interoperability between different data sets. You've got health organizations working with social care organizations, layering up data to create new insights around early intervention, this sort of stuff. So again, like, it's easier. It's easier to run your teams. It's easier to be to operate, but then it also creates this next level of opportunity around, okay, well, what do we do with all this data? This is where the exciting stuff as we move out of crisis mode and into the new reality. The potential there's huge, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point that there is so much exciting technology that exists out there today, right? Really innovative technology that IT teams can grasp to kind of drive everything forward. We want to make sure that the amount of time that is spent in kind of living in the old world and the old way of doing things gets addressed, right? Because we do find it can really hamper businesses, right, when they are still, in our world, seeing them kind of patching devices and worrying about security and all of the usual things. It's like, actually, forget that. Try to get yourself set up in a place where actually you've liberated yourself from a lot of that, and you've freed up your time to actually go and focus on a lot of the exciting, groundbreaking technology, right, that is coming to the forefront.
And I suppose let's unpack this a bit, because we get set up, right? We've got teams working remotely, we've got tools, we've got collaboration. Let's understand the art of the possible, right? What can technology do in terms of, Chrome OS and having all the tools on the Chromebooks and, this kind of seamless integration between systems? What's possible with this stuff? What could organizations be doing beyond, okay, we can be geographically diverse? Let's start to understand a bit about the art of the possible for what's coming next, or what they could be doing already.
Yeah. I mean, Chromebooks, I can speak to that, being personally involved in that. They offer some real key advantages in this kind of new way of working, where we're seeing this mix of some employees in office, some employees at home, and this kind of hybrid way of working, which to our mind is going to be very much here to stay, right? I think this is something we're all going to need to get used to. I think first and foremost is security, right? And this is something that we often get raised eyebrows when we state facts like Chromebooks don't require any antivirus or encryption software, for example, right? CISOs kind of fall off their chair and say, what are you talking about?
Against everything they've been taught to believe.
This is it. And it is challenging that status quo of this is what I know and this is what I understand. And then you enter into this kind of new way of doing things. And it's just understanding. I mean, in the world of Chrome, it's due to the kind of multi-layered security and protection, right, that a Chrome device offers. You've got things like a Google designed Titan C chip on every device, and sandboxing in the browser, data encryption, regular automatic updates happening in the background, so you don't ever worry about patching or anything like that again. We're proud of the fact that with Chrome OS, there's never been a reported ransomware attack on any business, education, or consumer Chrome OS device, right? And for IT teams that have had to deal with the aftermath of an attack of this nature,
and
eradicating that, it's huge, right? And particularly so when you're worrying about devices that are scattered across the country in people's living rooms and kitchens and bedrooms as they're getting their job done, right? That's even more of a headache to kind of keep a CISO and an IT team up at night, right? So that security is kind of paramount, and that's what's leading up a lot of our discussions today around helping public sector organizations kind of manage this new way of working. I think simplicity would be next, right? So the simplicity of management. So giving IT teams the ability to manage several devices remotely through a cloud-based admin console, right? So I think where Chrome tends to sit in this increasingly multi-OS environment with kind of Windows and Mac and Android devices and everything else, Chrome is often seen as the kind of set and forget OS, which has been very helpful in recent days. And that's really due to the significant reduction in support calls when compared to other operating systems, essentially down to the fact that it's being updated automatically, right, in the background. And in fact, the management of the devices is so simple. We've got examples of a single person administering thousands of devices being accessed remotely, right? So it completely changes the perception and of what's possible. Speed is really important as well. I think, again, as I say, it's no exaggeration, right, when I say a lot of these conversations move from a 2-year transition plan to actually we need to get things done by next Thursday. So the speed is at the heart of everything we do. Chromebooks come with things like zero touch enrollment, which again, that's the type of thing that I think is soon going to just become an expectation. You should be able to, if you're an IT admin, you should be able to actually organize to have a device drop shipped to an employee's home address. All that user has to do is unbox the device, connect to the internet, and all of the enterprise enrollment magically happens, right? And it just works for that employee. And I think that's something that was a long way off a few years ago, and today exists and has really helped a lot of organizations, right, over the last 18 months in particular, who suddenly found themselves shipping devices to users' home addresses and figuring out, how do I do this, right? Do I send an IT admin around to the addresses? Do I centrally bring them all in, right? There was a huge amount of complexity before you had things like zero touch enrollment. So as an end user, I think speed is really important as well. Again, the expectation of a device. Chromebooks, for instance, come with a 6-second boot up time, and something that makes you think differently about your laptop, right? You're not hitting the on button and going and making a cup of coffee because it's behaving more like your smartphone is, right? With kind of automated updates in the background. I think one of the biggest things in our world has been this adoption to a cloud first approach to things like collaboration, right? And how actually a very simple cloud-based device can help to drive behaviors that are really needed now to be successful in this new world, right? You want that device to be secure, but you actually want people working in a different way, right? So that everyone can move forward faster. Gone are the days of attaching various versions of documents in emails, right? Or thinking about storing important files on the actual device itself, believing that's more secure, right? That used to be the way that we always thought about things. These days, knowing that your files are being safely kept in the cloud and can be accessed from any device wherever the user happens to be is again becoming an expectation, and it's where you can just move forward that much faster, right?
And it's in a sense it's about removing the time and the effort around sort of practical mundane things, so that digital teams, IT teams, can actually start to focus their time on these kind of value adding activities, as opposed to calling in 1,000 laptops because they need updates or whatever. It's actually what can we do with our time now and our skills and our knowledge of the IT infrastructure to do something that really enhances people's working lives, as opposed to just keeps the lights on and keeps things going. So the less friction there is in sort of terms of systems, OSs and so on, then that's when the good stuff can happen elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We had a campaign recently that was all around liberating IT, right? Setting IT free, because nobody wants to be spending their life just patching devices, right? There's so much more exciting technology you can wrap your head around, right? And we don't need to do that anymore as well. I mean, I guess having said that, we also need to appreciate it's not easy to simply pick up and move to the cloud as well, right? So when I for one fully recognize how frustrating it must be for public sector agencies to sometimes hear cloud vendors speak about the great adoption they've seen from digital native businesses, right?
This is interesting. So
you'll see stuff like
you're moving into an area that I really wanted to get into, because in the adage of the old joke, well, if I was trying to get there, I wouldn't start from here, and that sort of thinking. And legacy it's a real thing, right? I mean, it's profound.
Yep.
Government organizations have so many systems, so many different databases, so much hardware, and this idea that, yeah, if you could start with a blank sheet of paper, it'd be happy days, wouldn't it? But legacy is real, both cultural and technical. So to your point there around adoption, moving to the cloud, sounds great, trips off the tongue, but what's your experience on how organizations, particularly public sector organizations, can overcome and unpick those issues and make their lives easier as they make that shift?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, the likes of Airbnb and Deliveroo and Salesforce and all the others, of course they fully embrace the cloud. They don't have to worry about legacy systems. They set themselves up to work that way from day one. What we tend to do is try to really understand where every public sector organization that we work with is at in their own particular journey, right, to the cloud, in order to determine if and how and when they can best leverage this technology. And everybody is in a different part of that journey, right? So we tend to help. We've got tools that exist that can really help them to better understand, for instance, the applications that their employees rely on each and every day. We offer our own kind of free to use tool set that public sector organizations that are seeking this intelligence about where they can begin to leverage things like cloud devices, where their starting point would be for that, right? And findings tend to reveal segments of the workforce who could actually move on to things like Chromebooks much faster than others, right? So often a public sector organization's frontline workforce, for instance, might be the starting point for things like shared devices, which is a really good story where you essentially have a rack of Chrome devices that a frontline workforce could quickly and securely access. But we're also seeing some real trends at the moment around areas that we hadn't really thought to before, but areas like contact center, right, where they seem to be a section of the workforce that typically has less of a dependency on a large number of legacy applications. They might have even moved on to a cloud-based contact center solution already, or perhaps is leveraging VDI today, right? And it's worth calling out VDI because that's featured in many of our largest deployments. We partner closely with Citrix and VMware, Nutanix, and others, right? With Chromebooks now being viewed as an ideal tool to access whichever virtual environment of their choice, right, happens to be in place. So there are definitely ways, and we would very rarely take a blanket approach, right, to any technology like this, because legacy applications, we need to work through that, right? And you need to work through that really down to segments of the workforce. But rarely will we ever find an organization that won't find some place to begin that journey, right? And that's really what we're after. Where is that starting point for them, right?
I mean, public sector organizations are unique from place to place. I mean, they all have their cultural quirks. They all work in slightly different ways. There's not a one size fits all approach, is there? There's not a one size fits all organization either. So it's interesting to hear that that's how you have to kind of respond and work with them in order to deliver that kind of more bespoke solution and that sort of thing. There's something I wanted to touch on, because it's an area that doesn't often get mentioned in the same breath as IT and technology, and that's the sustainability agenda. There's often the goals are around performance, capability, outcomes, but there's an aspect around sustainability increasingly. I mean, we've got COP26 coming up, and there are going to be demands around how organizations operate, the choices they're making, their procurement ideas, that are just going to become so prevalent that the idea that you can separate IT from the rest of the world is just not the case. So just wanted to sort of pick your brains a bit about this. Is how can IT teams bring sustainability into their thinking when they're sort of looking for solutions? Because I don't necessarily get the sense that it's particularly high up the agenda right now, but increasingly it will be.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sustainability, we're beginning to see it much more in the spotlight, right? And pleasingly, it's actually being raised as a topic in many more of our conversations. I do think that's going to grow, right, in time. I think environmental efficiency, it's always been a core value of Google's. We've been carbon neutral since 2007. We've got a goal to actually get to be running completely on carbon-free energy by 2030. And I think if I think about sustainability within the public sector space, 3/4 of councils in the UK, as well as many NHS trusts, have declared a climate emergency, right? So we've personally worked closely. One example who there's a public case study on was really around Kingston and Sutton, right? That was a trust where we've been fortunate to work closely with them. In 2019, they declared a climate emergency and committed to deliver carbon neutrality in their council operations by 2038. We had already been speaking with them about Chromebooks, and they actually worked with an environmental consultancy called PX3 to undertake an audit of things like the power saved, right, by moving from older desktop devices to Citrix VDI and Chromebooks, right? The power management capabilities, efficient charging, optimized device performance, sat alongside Citrix, ensuring all computing power is performed centrally in the cloud. And they actually benchmarked a 32% reduction in energy usage with the move to Citrix and Acer Chromebooks, which led to real savings, right? What was interesting, I found it really interesting just as a visualization, was that if you combine this reduction with the resultant reduced levels of commuting by employees, right, because they're working from home and they've got that mobility to work from home on these cloud-based devices, you would need 3,700 acres of mature forest, which was roughly 1.5 times the size of Richmond Park, right, to remove the equivalent amount of pollution from the atmosphere. So on the back of this study, there were some really interesting stats that came about. And if I think about technology partners that we work with, a lot of them are really determined to make a difference and really focusing on this. Each year there's 8 million metric tons of discarded water bottles, right, which find their way to our ocean floors. It's the equivalent weight of 57,000 blue whales. So it's startling what's happening out there, right? That a single-use plastic bottle takes 450 years to decompose. So there's partners like HP, for instance, whose latest Chromebook is made up of 75% recycled aluminium, and the keyboard includes 50% recycled plastic. And the speakers are actually made from plastics that were previously ocean bound, right? Meaning they're found within 50 kilometers of an ocean coastline or a major waterway that feeds into the ocean. We do let technology buyers know about tools such as the Energy Star rating and EPEAT, which is an electronic product environmental assessment tool. These tools make it easier for organizations to shop for environmentally friendly products. Essentially, purchasers can evaluate the effect of a particular product on the environment, right? And EPEAT, for instance, assesses various life cycle environmental aspects of a device and ranks products as kind of gold, silver, or bronze. So these are all things that I think will find their way into kind of tenders and so on, and rightly so, right? They should become much more of an expectation. From our side, within the Chrome team, we're really challenging the perception of what has become somewhat of an industry standard of the kind of 3 to 5 year device cycle refresh, right? Chromebooks now come with 8 years of OS support from the date of manufacture, and being kind of lightweight devices with a durable design and components like spill-proof keyboards and scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass. These devices are lightweight, and they should last longer than that, right? So we shouldn't always be benchmarking against a 3 to 5 year device cycle refresh and all of the kind of e-waste that comes along with that. Last year, Google actually acquired a business called Neverware, which has provided us with technology that's now able to convert older PCs and Macs into Chromebooks. It offers 13 years of OS support from their original date of manufacture, which, as you can imagine, that's not only the potential to save considerable amounts of money to avoid the next hardware refresh cycle, but it's also a really great example of sustainable IT, right? And getting more from your hardware that exists, which is it's a very, very interesting time, I think, for all things sustainability, and we always welcome that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's great to hear that there is actually so much being done and so many options already, and as you say, it will only accelerate. And the idea that IT teams are sort of big consumers and everybody else is sort of doing the hard work in terms of reducing, footprints and that sort of thing. There's not a magic bullet. So every member of every team in every organization is going to have to be pursuing these sustainability goals in the way they work, in the way they procure. And the government have brought in, I think the detail, I think it's if you're bidding for a contract worth over £5 million, then you have to have a clear commitment to being carbon neutral. You can't just say, yeah, we're green. You actually have to demonstrate it even to get into the bidding process. That's a fundamental shift in the way public sector procurement is going to be working. And so if you as an organization haven't got your ducks in a row and haven't got a solution which fulfills that, then there's no future in the public sector market for you.
That's it. Yeah. And totally bring it on, right? This is an area that I'm really passionate about. Being the father of 3 young boys, suddenly I think that it changes your perception and mindset of how important it is and how seriously we take all of this stuff. And I think government leading by example is fantastic to hear, right? And needs to happen. And again, a lot of this comes down to just challenging the status quo, challenging, as I say, that three-year device cycle refresh doesn't need to be like that now, right? It's different. So it's a good conversation to be having, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've transformed the way people should be working. We've outlined how we're going to save the world. We've done a good job of covering a lot of ground during this conversation, which is good. I mean, these are the big issues that need to be brought to the fore. Pleased to say you're also going to be joining us for the conference next month as well, joining our panel discussions, which is great news, because I think hearing how we need these real world examples of, okay, here's technology, but what's it doing? What can it deliver? How can it change how we work? So we're looking forward to hosting you at the conference next month. But in the meantime, I think having outlined how the world's going to be saved, we've done our job for the day. I just want to say, Lyndon, thanks for joining me. It's been a really enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Really nice to meet you, and look forward to conference next month. So thanks for having me.
So there we have it. Thank you, Lyndon, for that conversation. Really enjoyed drilling into some of those aspects of the remote workforce, the digital workplace, and how organizations are adapting to the new way of working. As we mentioned up top, Lyndon's joining us at the Local Government Transformation Show next month for a session that explores the future of the digital workplace. As well as Lyndon, we have an expert panel that also features the London Borough of Harrow, London Borough of Haringey, and our own David Well, GM for Government. So people that are delivering on the front line, how they're working, how they're adapting, how they're enhancing the way that their teams operate in this hybrid model. Loads of practical insights going to be shared there, so don't miss out on that one. It's free to register as always. All you have to do is follow the link in the show notes attached to this episode, and you can join us for that live Q&A and panel discussion on the 23rd of November at 8:30 a.m. So kickstart your day with a prototype of how to work in the digital era. Look forward to that one when we come around to November. But in the meantime, that's all. I'll join you again soon with another conversation with a public sector changemaker. Until then, goodbye.